Alright, 7th graders, good evening. Welcome to your YouTube homework review. For tonight's homework, we are reviewing how to multiply whole numbers and fractions. Jumping right into it, we have 6 wholes times 1/2, and the strategy you probably learned before is to take the whole number and rewrite it as a fraction, because multiplying two fractions is an easy procedure. 6 times 1 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2, and then 6 halves, that would be the exact same as 3 wholes. And that would be totally fine, but if you've been watching the videos this week, you know I'm trying to get you to think about this a little bit more conceptually. So 6 times 1/2, that's the same as saying 6 repeats of adding 1/2, because multiplication is the same as repeated addition. So 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2 6 times. And now that we know that, you could think about what this procedure is actually doing. It's taking the 6 and multiplying it by the 1, because there's 6 of them. And when I have it laid out like this, I kind of like to add it in parts. 1/2 and 1/2, that's a whole. 1/2 and 1/2, that's another whole. 1/2 and 1/2 is the third whole. And then if you add all 3 of those together, we figure out that 6 halves is the same as 3. So same deal with C and D. You could start off with the procedure 3/4. But by now, hopefully you're noticing that when you multiply by a whole number, you don't really need to put the 1 on the bottom, because all we're doing is we're multiplying these two numbers, the 8 and the 3. Over here we multiplied the 6 and the 1. And you're doing that because you're repeating this however many times. So 3/4 times 8 is the same as 3/4 repeated 8 times. And when we add all of that, the 4 is not going to change, because when we're adding fractions, the denominator is constant. The only thing that changes is we're going to have 3/4 8 times. So that's going to be 24. So again, that's what this procedure is doing. The denominator is going to stay fourths, because we're just getting a bunch of fourths. And the numerator changes because we're going to have 24 fourths, right? That's 3 repeated 8 times. And from there, it makes sense to think, well, how many 4s go into 24? And that would be the same as 6 wholes. And again, down here, when you add all of this up, you would end up with 24 fourths, which is the same. Now, for my higher level thinkers, I also gave you guys a different way to think of this yesterday. So 3/4 times 8, that could also be thought of as 3/4 of 8. So imagine that you had 8 M&Ms, and you want to take 3/4 of 8 M&Ms. Well, the first thing I see that we can do is we could break it up into fourths, right? If we have 8 of something, then 2 of that something is going to be 1/4. And another 2 is going to make 2/4. And another 2 is going to make 3/4. And another 2 would make 4/4, which would be the whole. So here, if you think about it, 3/4 of 8 is going to be the same as 6. So that's another way you could have thought of 3/4 times 8. Alright, on to reviewing things we covered on previous homeworks, and that you also learned in 4th and 5th grade. 2/5 plus 1/2, we can't just add that and get like 3/7 or something, because the pieces are different sizes. So 2/5 and 1/2, I need to make equivalent fractions. And I see that 5 and 2 have a least common multiple of 10, which is what I want. I want to change both of them into a fraction with the same denominator. So now I know I can just multiply by 2 over 2 to get 4/10. And then 1/2, honestly, I just know that that's 5/10 because 5 is half of 10, but you could have also multiplied by 5. So now we take these original fractions and we rewrite them. That's a 4, sort of. And now it's simple. Same size, they're both tenths, so you're going to end up with 9/10, which is almost a whole. And that makes sense because, well, that makes sense because 1/2 is half of a whole, and 2/5 is just a little bit smaller than half. So I know that my answer, when you add half and something a little bit smaller than another half, should be a little bit smaller than a whole. Okay, the next question is 5 1/3 plus 4 5/6. So I'm going to start by adding the wholes, which would give us 9. And then 1/3 plus 5/6. First, I'm going to rewrite this as 2/6. Adding those together, I would get 7/6. But 7/6 has pushed me past another whole, because 6/6 would be one whole. So this would be 1 and 1/6 left over. So now we add the 9, which we got from the 5 and the 4, and the 1 and 1/6, which we got from the two fractions. And we get a final answer, which I'll write over here, of 10 wholes and 1/6. All right, 3/4 minus 2/3. Again, with this one, the denominators aren't the same, so we need to make them the same. The least common multiple of 4 and 3 is 12. So I'm going to convert both fractions into 12ths. I notice that I can multiply by 3, so I get 9/12. I notice that I can multiply this by 4, so I get 8/12. Adding these two together, or no, not adding, we're subtracting. So 9/12 minus 8/12 equals 1/12. And that would be your answer. Last one is -4/5 times -1/2. Same signs, they're both negative, so I know my answer is going to be positive, which I'll put here even though we don't really need to put. And we multiply 4 times 1, which is 4, 5 times 2, which is 10. So now we'll get rid of this. Our answer should be 4/10. And 4/10, if we simplify it, divide both the 4 and 10 by a common factor of 2, you would get 2/5. All right, on to ratios on the back. Elsa scores 12 points every 6 minutes. How many points will she score after 24 minutes? So we have this ratio of 12 points for every 6 minutes. And I'm going to put that onto a double number line. 6 minutes, 12 points. And I want to scale this up to 24 on the minute side. So not down here, because these are points. I want to get up to 24 on the top. So another 6 minutes pass would be 12 minutes. And every 6 minutes, Elsa scores 12 points because she's good like that. And we get 24 points. Scale it up again. Another 6 minutes would be 18, which would mean Elsa would score another 12 points, which would be 36. And now we make it up to what we want, which is 24 minutes. That would be 48 points. In a ratio table, we have 12 points every 6 minutes. We want to scale this up to 24 minutes. And I know that 6 times 4 is going to give me 24. So I scale this up. 12 times 4 is 48. And that times 4 is connected to this because we scaled up by 1, 2, 3, 4 times the original ratio. So that's the same as 6 times 4. At this rate, how many points will Elsa score after 9 minutes? So this one's kind of tricky, but it helps to have the double number line. So 9 minutes, I know, is exactly in the middle of 6 and 12. And so now I need to figure out what's exactly in the middle of 12 and 24. And if that's confusing, one thing you could do is you can come back to the start and just break up her original ratio. Like that 6 minutes and 12 points, you could break that in half to get 3 minutes and 6 points. And now we could just go up by that. 3 to 6, 6 to 12, add another 3 up over here, and add another 6 down there, which would give us 18. So that's the ratio we want. So at this rate, Elsa would score 18 points. Some students get really comfortable with the ratio table, and they'll just do something like this. They would take this original ratio and say, all right, I need to get to 9 minutes, but 6 doesn't go into that. So first, I'm going to break 6 down into something that will work, which would be 3. Then, since 3 is going to go into 9, I'm just going to multiply by 3 to get to 9. And that's kind of a really flexible way that you can use a ratio table to get to that same answer of 9 minutes, which we wanted to get 18 points. All right, and as with any equivalent ratios, there's always an equation because all ratios are proportional relationships. So write an equation relating the number of points to the number of minutes. Let's go back and see if we can see any relationship here. So the starting ratio is 12 points every 6 minutes. If I look down here, multiplying the minutes times 2 would give us the points. Multiplying the minutes times 2 here would give us the points. And it turns out any equal ratio we get from the situation, you could multiply the minutes times 2 to equal the points. Any one. So 24 times 2 would be 48. 18 times 2 would be 36, and so on. So let me just pay attention here. The minutes times 2 is the points. So I need to do the minutes times 2 to equal the points. And writing this algebraically, we would get m for minutes times 2 equals p, which is the same as 2m equals p. All right, so hopefully you figured that out. All right, so like I said, I finally finished grading all of your integer problem solvers guides, and this is an excerpt from Musa's very last page. A lot of you guys made up your own problems. Musa went nuts. Look at the problem that he came up with for order of operations. This was his creation. -5 plus -6 in parentheses times 3 to the second power plus, in parentheses, -6 times 2 divided by 4 end parentheses minus parentheses -5 plus -6 end parentheses. He created this crazy problem and then he simplified it perfectly. So pretty cool. And our secret word to end the homeworks for this week is going to be dang. Dang, Musa. Thanks for checking out your homework, guys, and see you in class.